What's up, guys? So for today's video, I felt like I wanted to talk about depression, which is something I think I have some experience with. I wouldn't say that I'm an expert or I'm not a mental health professional or anything like that, but I do feel like I have some experiences worth talking about and worth sharing. So let's do that. Where to begin? I guess narrative wise, let me talk about my life story a little bit again. I don't think I was depressed as a child. I think my childhood was pretty alright. I was, having fun, reading books, playing video games. I didn't have any reason. Well, even the phrase reason to be depressed is a very tricky one because, it implies this certain cause and effect relationship in which depression is an outcome, and I don't think it works quite that way. I have a thread on Twitter somewhere about how somebody said something like you're so successful to somebody else. Somebody said something to somebody else which was along the lines of, you're so successful, what do you have to be depressed about? Which I think reveals a belief system where you might be depressed if you're going through difficult things, and you shouldn't be depressed if you are achieving conventional ideas of success, which if you examine the data, if you look it up, you'll find that it doesn't correspond to reality. I think a lot of Nobel Prize winners subsequently have been depressed and even committed suicide. Why is that? I think so to some degree, so I think the phrase that I had, or the tweet that I had, was I think depression very often, or some amount of the time, it's not so much a function of the relative value of the cards that you're dealt in life, but just a frustration with the way the game is at all, right? So there are some facts like people in cities are more depressed than people in rural communities. There's a bunch of quotes from Sebastian Junger's Tribe. He has a whole bunch of stats and figures, and I think there is correlation between kind of how much a person feels embedded in their community, feels taken care of, feels kind of socially embedded, socially relevant, valued, and how much they're not. So in a more atomized capitalistic kind of society where even if you have a lot of money, the fact that you need to spend money to get what you want can be depressing in a way. I totally believe that there are depressed billionaires, and the money might have made them happy to accumulate the money, but then sitting in the chair, right, where you have to then kind of be the one to make things happen, or just who are your friends, right? Like, do you know if the people in your life really care about you, or are they just hanging out with you for the money? You everything becomes kind of materialistic. It becomes kind of you start worrying that everybody wants something from you, that they don't actually care about who you are, they just care about your money, stuff like that. That has to be depressing, right? Like, it's people who don't have money will say that oh, boo-hoo, cry me a river, like I'll trade places with me, I'll happily be depressed in your shoes, which it's easy to say, right? But I think it's more complex than that. Anyway, I think, okay, so my first experience of what I think was depression was around the age of 17. I think there were smaller incidents and smaller frustrations that accumulated from school when I was about maybe 12, 13. I was doing pretty well. I was doing very well in school early on, and straight A's and everything like that. But then eventually, so I got into Singapore's gifted education program, which I might make a separate video about. And I did well by national standards, but I didn't do well by gifted standards. So relative to my peers in my class, I was made to feel like I was underachieving and I was not doing well enough to get into like the best school, and my parents were disappointed with me, and I had to go for like counseling. It was a mess. I might talk about that separately, but it was just it was really unpleasant. But I thought that I remember being sad. I remember being pretty miserable at not doing as well as I'd hoped. I remember crying. I remember just kind of beating myself up and feeling like I was being beaten up by society, by my family and my context. But I don't think I felt depressed then at 13 or 14. Maybe it was like accumulative, maybe, I don't know. But like around 17, so things got messier. I repeated a year in school, in junior college. I didn't know what I was going to be doing. I felt like junior college was way more almost dystopian. Like it felt like so like, when you're 13 or 14, or when I was 13 or 14 and I was in secondary school, right? So you're still learning English, math, science, chemistry, physics. Like those things at that level, it still kind of felt relevant to life. Like it felt like I was learning things that were sensible and worth learning. But by the time I was in junior college, apart from like the general paper, like it felt like the math and science that I was doing there, it seemed not relevant to my life. It seemed like kind of excessively specialized, and I wasn't interested in being so specialized. And I realized on retrospect, it would probably have been better for me to go to polytechnic. So in Singapore, you have like when you're done in secondary school, you can go to junior college, you can go to polytechnic, you can go to there's other tertiary institutions, but you are generally so if you are like middle class or moderately smart, you're generally expected to go to junior college. Well, it depends on the crowd that you hang out with, but like I used to hang out with the gifted kids, and it's all gifted kids pretty much go to junior college because junior college is a stepping stone to university. And so it's just assumed that by the time you're age 13 or so, that you're going to want to go to university, which I didn't even have a chance to make that choice. Like the choice was architectured for me. It was framed for me that all my friends are going to university. Any smart kid would go to university, and to go to university you got to go to junior college, and you got to it felt wrong to me in a way that I couldn't explain. And looking back now, I can kind of say that I was already on the internet around age like 7, right? So I had already been on the internet for like a decade at this point. And I was playing in a band, I was on MySpace, I was on forums. I felt like I was learning something from the internet that was telling me something about the state of the world and how the world is, and building relationships with people around the world that felt very dissonant with what I was going through in school. And school just felt fake. It felt forced, it felt arbitrary. It didn't make sense to me. I hated it, but I felt like I had no choice but to go every day. And so I in 2007, I was repeating a year in school. I had a band that was a big source of meaning in my life. Like I've written a whole draft of a novel about my experiences in the local music scene. And my band was kind of falling apart because my drummer, so me and my guitarist, we both repeated a year, but my drummer didn't repeat a year, so he had his A-level examinations the second year. And so towards the end, it felt like just we couldn't practice anymore. He had to focus on his studies, and the band was kind of taking a backseat. So the thing that was kind of one of the primary sources of value and meaning in my life was kind of fading out. My girlfriend then, who is now my wife, we got back together, but my girlfriend and I broke up. So that was super depressing. And I mean, it was upsetting, right? And so my girlfriend broke up with me, my band was falling apart, I repeated a year in school. I tried dating other girls and it never worked out. Like I think it's because, on retrospect, I think it's because I was coming at it from such a place of neediness. I think every girl who I interacted with could tell that I was kind of almost desperate for the validation, I guess, right? Like, what does a 17-year-old want in a relationship? Like, what does a relationship mean? Someone to just share a space with, like an emotional space, intellectual space. I mean, and it's hormones. You're horny. You wanna make out, but it's it doesn't. When I try to make sense of the feelings that I had, I just felt unwanted, unloved, unappreciated. I felt like I was in a kind of prison, right? I felt like I had no choice but to follow this path that I didn't believe in and didn't care for. And I had all these beliefs about how things should be, but the reality of my situation was not in accordance with those beliefs. And so I felt distress at being at that kind of discordance, right? It just dissonance. It just felt like like an out of tune instrument. Like, it's jarring. It's like, oh, what's going on? And so either I had been, the whole time I was growing up, everyone would say that I'm really smart. So and I felt smart, I guess. Like, I would just get things quicker than other people, and I'm used to, I read a lot of books, and so I never doubted my own intelligence, like raw intelligence. But I didn't seem to be able to do what I was told. I didn't seem to be able to, even myself, like when I tried to make a study plan for myself, I couldn't seem to follow it. And I just felt I almost feel like it's almost a kind of dysphoria. I mean, I don't want to, so I'm a straight guy, so I don't want to make claims about experiences that I haven't had, but it reminds me of that. It felt like I was living a life that wasn't real, in a way, right? I felt like I was in a bad dream, like a persistent bad dream that wasn't going away. And I did have suicidal thoughts. But the thing that I don't think I ever took those thoughts seriously, because I felt like I had to be right at some level. Like, I like my criticisms or my discomfort and all that. Like, I felt that I was being rigorous in my examination. On retrospect, not as rigorous as I could have been, but I was as rigorous as I could be at the time. And it didn't make sense. And so I wanted to figure out what I was wrong about. Like I felt like I was mostly right, but wrong in some ways that I couldn't comprehend. And from past experience, I know that I eventually comprehend things when I just try to make sense of it long enough. So I did that. And I also felt that, like, if I committed suicide, it would have been too small. Like, I am a dramatic individual, and I did feel that if I remember thinking. So I remember there was one year, I don't know if it's 2007 or 2008, I went to Bay Beats, which is like Singapore's annual public music festival. And I knew a lot of the bands that were playing. I knew a lot of the people who were showing up to catch those bands. So I was walking around all these people, and every other minute or so, somebody would be like, "Hey Visa, hey, how you doing? Hey," like, people recognized me. And one of the bands even gave me a shout out from on stage, saying like, Visa organized this, wrote a review, and that was really nice, blah blah blah. And it should have made me really happy, but I just felt empty inside. I just felt cold, and like, all of these people are saying my name, but like, if I died in a month or 2 months, they would have moved on, and it would be like I had never been here. And that idea made me, I don't know, I want to say angry, but not at anybody specifically. It made me want to change that. It made me want to change the world in a way, right? Like, I felt that the world that I inherited was not good enough, and that I needed to change it, and I was gonna change it. It is, so I sometimes joke in private that, like, I actually feel like I have a lot in common with mass shooters, which is that I believe that we share the same sense of frustration with social reality, And the difference being that, first of all, I don't believe in violence. And second, I have kind of imagination and vision to reshape the world, or reshape my world around myself to become what I believe is right. And, there's a poem that's like, that ends with, the red washing down the bathtub does not change the color of the ocean at all. Which is that, yeah, like, if you want to make, if you want to change the ocean, you can't use your blood. Like, you have to do something much bigger, much longer, much more, So in a way, like, I think the thought I had last night was like, in a way, I did commit suicide in a sense. Like, again, not this is. I don't mean to trivialize people who have attempted it, or who have been through it, or who are grieving family members who've been through it, friends who've been through it. My heart is with everyone who has suffered, but like, so that's their suffering, which I will never relate to, hopefully, or it's difficult stuff, right? But like, I went through what I went through, and it did feel like there, like, I've spent a lot of time reading about suicide at that point, and I've spoken with people. I've been on like our suicide watch, and I've talked to a lot of people, and just the sense that I get is, very often people who have suicidal thoughts, or like who that kind of thing, they it's not that they want to die so much as they don't want to keep living anymore. And I feel like, to some degree, I did not want to live like that anymore. And I guess, like, there's probably some privilege in the fact that the pain of my life at the time, while painful, was not unbearable, right? So that is what it is. But I remember, I guess I just want to talk about how bleak life felt when I was 17. I truly felt like I was trapped. I truly felt like I was in prison in a way, and like, for a crime I did not commit, right? For the crime of being me. Like, why me? Why did I have to be subjected to what felt like disproportionate, I can't say abuse, but like just ill treatment. I don't know. Like, I did not feel. You could say it's selfish, maybe. Like, everyone goes to school, whatever. But I genuinely feel like I was picked on more because I'm tall and dark and have a funny name. And I don't know. I'm not neurotypical, I guess. I still can't entirely explain it. I will still need to talk to a lot more people about their experiences and their lives and their thoughts to kind of contextualize. I know how I feel about it. The challenge in talking about it is calibrating my utterances to resonate with other people's perspective on the world. And so I've had to study other people's lives and beliefs to try and understand how I can talk to them about my experiences, right? So this is just another attempt, and I will revise my perspective on this as we go. But I do believe I was basically clinically depressed when I was about 17. How did I get through that? I just lived through each day. I journaled a lot, I guess, and I still played music. Music meant a lot to me. I am one of those guys who will say that music saved me, in the sense that it gave me, it's musicians and artists are like the therapists of the human species, and like, you pay for their albums or gigs and whatnot, but like, they are underpaid, for the emotional for how they help people with their feelings, right? They put words to feelings, they put sounds to feelings, they give people a context to make sense of their feelings. So even when you're singing along to My Chemical Romance and singing I'm Not Okay, if not for that song, would I have been able to say that? I don't know. And it feels good to say it out loud, whether to whatever degree that it's true or not true. Like, it's theater, right? It's drag. You experiment with the utterances to see how it feels and see whether it resonates. And yeah, I would say that a substantial amount of my emotional intelligence is a function of music and my exposure to theater and the arts. Yeah, so I survived day by day. I was very miserable, but somehow I just kept persisting, and it felt like once I was done with once I was done with junior college, that was a huge weight off my shoulders. I got back together with my girlfriend. We were separated for like 2 whole years. We broke up when we were 17, and we got back together when we were 19. And it felt like we were different people. We both tried to date other people, but we didn't. Nobody worked, and we got married like a couple of years later, which was nice. I mean, we're still together. This is our house. But then I went to the army. So in Singapore, every able-bodied male has to serve either in the military or the police or the civil defense force. And I was assigned to the military, and I much preferred military life to school life. I feel like while mandatory conscription is a bit of a drag, in the context of Singapore, as a Singaporean, I understand the reasoning behind it. I understand the purpose. I felt to some degree proud of participating in my national process. Like, I mean, when one guy talks with other guys about NS, we all kind of complain about it. We're like, we got to serve, waste 2 years of our lives. It's as individual experiences, it's not something I would really recommend. But within the broader context, like having suffered through it or whatever, it's nice that when I see another guy wearing a army singlet, I know that we share that common experience. And I understand the purpose of national service for men in Singapore. So, and I felt like the people in that institution were honest with me about my role in that organization and kind of what was expected of us. Like, I feel like there's this doublespeak in school where they don't entirely, at least in my case, in my experience, where they aren't entirely honest with you, and they kind of just have these vague platitudes about, it's about your future, it's about your education. And I am now 29 years old. I'm going to be 30 in like 3 months. I make a living entirely on the internet, with skills that I picked up on the internet. Nothing from junior college helped me. In fact, I would say junior college set me back as a writer. Like, I had to unlearn what I had been forced to learn in school in terms of writing. Because, school has that very strict and formulaic style of writing. And the style of writing that normal readers actually like to read is when you write like you speak, or you write from the heart. You write what you think. You write what is most important and what is most interesting, what is most funny, as opposed to, here are my topic sentences. Here is the evidence behind my argument. Like, that there's something stodgy and formulaic about that structure that just, it takes a while to shake off if you learn to do it. I mean, I was doing really well for like essays and stuff. And even then, it's like, I would be improvising and just goofing off. But where was I going with that? So today I think I crossed a personal milestone, and I sold like US $100 worth of ebooks. Nothing in junior college prepared me for that. I learned how to do that from playing in bands. I learned how to do that from running a MySpace page. I learned how to do that from arguing with people on forums. Like, I have been entirely responsible for my own education and my own economic viability. And I get that, for most people that's probably not really an option. For most people, I'm so tired. I don't agree that most people can't do it. I think most people have been conditioned to believe that they can't do it. And so once they believe it, it becomes true. Like, once you believe that you can't live in the wild, then you have no choice but to live in the zoo. And once you live in the zoo, you have to jump through the hoops to get your food. But you know, every zoos are recent inventions. Like for a long time, like civilization is a recent invention. For like 100,000 years, humans lived without civilization, and it's only been we have lived with creature comforts for a relatively short amount of time, and we are already so kind of dependent on them. I mean, we seem dependent on them, but I don't think we're as dependent on them as we think. But like we are so afraid of discomfort and failure and all of those things. Anyway, this video is not supposed to be about civilization. This video is supposed to be about depression. Anyway, so national service was actually pretty good for me. I had a lot of time to read, I had a lot of time to write, which I didn't have in junior college. So I think that was like a release valve for me, and I became less depressed. I became more well adjusted. I was spending more time with my friends. I was writing a lot. That felt pretty good. I had a good time psychologically, emotionally during my national service. I created a Facebook group with a bunch of friends locally, and we did meetups, and that was another source of meaning for me. So all of that went pretty well. I became like a blogger in Singapore. I was blogging about local politics, and that gave me some sense of meaning, and made me feel like I was contributing to something, like I was being a part of something. And then in late 2012, I got married, and so in 2013, I had to get a job to pay for this house, right? And I got a job at this software company. It's called Anafor Referral Candy, and it was I spent 5.5 years there. I was the founder, Dinesh. He found me through my blog, and it was some of the best. I would say it was the best 5 years of my life in terms of learning. Dinesh was a real mentor to me in a way that I had never had before. He was like this model of productivity and responsibility, and to some degree a certain masculine excellence. I don't know if he would have described himself as masculine excellence, but like just a male role model that I admired, that I looked at and I thought, I want to be more like this guy. And I know that I will never be him because each person can only be themselves, right? So I want to be the best version of myself. Dinesh would never be wearing rings and sitting in front of a video camera and talking about his feelings on YouTube. That's a Visa thing to do. That's not a Dinesh thing to do. But the discipline and focus to sit down and do these things, that I would say is kind of a Dineshi thing to do. Like in terms of figuring out what my priorities are, figuring out what my goals are, figuring out what steps I need to take towards my goals. These are all things that I may have read about before, but it was witnessing Dinesh going through those things that taught me how to do these things, and so I'm doing them. And so I'm very thankful and #blessed that Dinesh found me and hired me and kept me around for 5.5 years. That said, he wouldn't have found me if not for my blog. And so shout out to 17-year-old Visa for blogging, right? Because blogging was my way out. Blogging was like my tunnel in Shawshank. It was my way out of my circumstances into the world. And the world, I was kind of doing a trust fall into the world. But it's not really, the cool thing is, like, the idea of a trust fall is scary because if nobody catches you, you're fucked. But with a blog, like, once you publish stuff publicly, it's always falling, and you don't get hurt because eventually someone will catch you, and if nobody catches you today, they might catch you next year, and there's no harm. Yeah, but so okay, when I started work, I quickly found myself kind of overwhelmed because, again, like, I never learned to study, I never learned to manage my time properly, I never learned to keep to a schedule, and worse still, all those years of getting punished for failing at things, it made me develop kind of negative associations with those things. Like, I'm bad with even today, I'm bad with schedules, I'm bad with to-do lists, I'm bad with following up on things that I'm kind of like, if I miss a deadline, I'm bad at following up on it. Like, I tend to, that kind of thing. And I found myself beating myself up at work because I felt like, to some degree, at some level, working for Dinesh was like my dream job. Like, literally a year earlier, I didn't know if anybody would ever hire me for anything. because I didn't have a degree. I didn't have any skills that I thought were valuable. And then here's some guy who reads my blog and say, hey, I like your blog. Want to come and work for me for a software company writing blog stuff? I'm like, wow, I get to make money on the internet. Like I get to be paid to be online. Like my first name card, like, you know, there's the formal name card and the informal name card. My formal name card said blog/social media manager, and my informal name card said internet addict, I think. And it was just so fun to get to be an internet addict for a living. And I was very, very blessed, and I felt like my circumstances were great things that I had not earned. I mean, I get at the time. I felt, because it was my first job, I felt like I was like, Dinesh took a chance on me that he didn't have to, and so I think even to this day I feel a sense of gratitude and obligation, even that you know, he paid me for the work that I did. He paid me pretty well, and you know, he gave me a context in which I was able to discover opportunities, which was it was amazing in a lot of fronts. But I felt I was in over my head to some degrees, right? Like it was a very high functioning environment. Everyone was really smart. Everyone was really hardworking. Nobody explicitly said anything like you are expected to work super fucking hard, but it's just kind of informally, you see everyone being so good at their work, you just feel compelled to keep up, right? Like you don't want to let your teammates down. And I just felt like I was always kind of not doing enough, and I felt like I didn't have time for myself. So I mean, there's layers to this, right? So part of the reason I felt like I didn't have time for myself was because I'm bad at time management to begin with, and then there's the context that I'm in, stuff like that. And so I started to feel like I remember there was a day where I was at work, and I was feeling very sorry for myself. I remember specifically thinking, like, at some point the thought like fuck my life crossed my mind, and then immediately it got hit by like a train in the opposite direction, going, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like a couple of years ago, this would have been beyond your wildest dreams, right? Like in 2011, if you had told me that you will be hired by a smart elder guy who understands where you're coming from, who will be a good manager to you, who will be supportive and encouraging and yet challenge you in the right ways, and you'll be working on the internet, and you'll be reading and studying about like e-commerce and you know, learn about the world and all those things. If you knew that was your job, you would be ecstatic. And that's true, I would have been. And yet, you know, something about the circumstances of, like, I was working on a blog post, and I felt like I wasn't on top of it. Like, I had done a lot of research, but I didn't know what the blog post was going to be about. It just felt all over the place. I just felt sad for some reason. I just felt like I wasn't good enough, I think. And at the same time, because I wasn't, you know, like, now that I look back, like now that I look back, like a couple of years since I left, I look back at my trajectory. I can say with pride that I do think I was one of the best in the world at doing content marketing for a software company. I when I joined the company, I think our blog was getting about 1,000 hits a month, and when I left, it was over 120,000 hits a month. Like, so I made a substantial difference. You know, I definitely made a positive material impact to the company. I do think that I contributed more than my money's worth. I think so. Or, you know, at least I don't think, you know, so while I was there, I was constantly worried that I wasn't kind of carrying my fair share of the weight. But since leaving and looking back and talking to other people, I do feel like I did my part. I made a contribution that, I still look at some of the posts that I wrote back then, and I think what I am current, like 29-year-old Visa is impressed by 23, 24-year-old. Wow, it's like 6, 7, like 8 years, 6 and 7 years. 29-year-old me is impressed by the amount of effort that 23-year-old me put into his work. Like, I would agonize about shit. Like, I would think about things more than I was paid to. I would be thinking about work even on the weekends, even, at home. I'll be doing work after work, which, again, I don't recommend this, and I don't think it's healthy. And I think I would have been even more productive if I had been better at demarcating my time and kind of managing it properly. But anyway, what I'm kind of getting around to is when I realized that I couldn't keep up with like my blogging, like my social, political, Singaporean blogging, and like my marketing, e-commerce, like day job work. I sat down and analyzed it, and I'm like, I can't be arguing with people on Facebook when like I haven't shipped all of my work, right? I haven't met all of my deadlines, blah blah blah. And so like I made the decision to kind of step away from like the blogging scene and like the social commentary scene, which was evolving anyway, because when I first started blogging, I remember like Facebook didn't even have a share button yet. So like if you wrote a good blog post, people would be posting blog posts on Facebook. But these days it's like if you want content to go viral on Facebook, like you can just post a status directly to Facebook, and people share that instead, which is it's a different dynamic. It's a different the game has changed. But like even so, I was arguing with people on Facebook all the time about local politics and stuff, and I got quite disillusioned with it. I think around late 2013 maybe, like I unfriended everybody on Facebook, and I unfollowed everyone on Twitter and Instagram, and like also I went dark on all social media, which was was kind of I think I went into like a little bit of a shock, like just it's like suddenly going on a sugar fast or something, right? Like just the sudden absence of stimulation kind of rattled me a little bit. And it was a source of self-worth for me, I guess, to be participating in these conversations and feeling like I was making some kind of difference, like socially, whatever that meant, like arguing with people on Facebook. And I was posting roughly the same shit. If you follow me on Twitter, or if you look at this YouTube video, like it was basically this sort of thing. Like I was talking about what I felt was the right thing to do, blah blah blah. And I don't regret that I used to post those things. And now that I'm here in this position at this time in my life, I find myself kind of revisiting those ideas and kind of approaching it in a, I think, more healthy way. But basically, when I cut that stuff out of my life, I became depressed again. And not because I cut the stuff out of my life per se, but because I came to realize that like the meaning I was deriving from that stuff was kind of conditional, was kind of I think I used to have one-on-ones with my boss, and one of the things I discussed was kind of just I had developed some kind of addiction. Maybe addiction is too strong a word, but like I had a habit of seeking validation from like superficial-ish interactions, and I didn't want that. I wanted to do something more substantial with my life, and it felt like the curtain was pulled, the rug was pulled from under me. It felt like I was suddenly forced to confront the fact that the stuff that I was kind of deriving meaning from was, in my own new assessment, wasn't really all that meaningful. I wasn't really making that much of a difference. And when I pulled that rug out, I found myself falling. And also, just having bills to pay, right? Like, like it's just relentless. So I bought this house, right? It's not an amazing house. Like my walls aren't painted. Look at that stuff. It's a very Spartan house. Like it's a 4-room HDB flat, and my wife and I couldn't afford to renovate the kitchen. So the kitchen, even today, like 6-7 years after we bought the house, it's kind of in a state of disrepair. Like we don't really have proper cabinets and stuff, and I'm okay with that. But like at the time, after a couple of years of working, and while I was making progress at work, and while I was married to the woman I love, I just felt like life felt so relentless. I had less time for leisure than I had ever had before. I was constantly exhausted. I feel like I was rushing from deadline to deadline. Life just felt so relentless, and it felt like a jail sentence all over again in a way. Like and this time, it was with much better parameters. So it's like there was the shit jail that I was in school, and then I broke free from that jail, and then now I entered this nice jail, which is where like I love my colleagues, I love my boss, I love my wife, but existence just feels like fucking prison anyway. Like I have to wake up every day and go to work, get in the train, fucking suffer through the Singapore rush hour commutes, crowded trains. I have this long ass commute from Yishun to Bishan. I gotta change trains from Bishan to One North. Takes like an hour, 20 minutes sometimes. And then I go on my commute. I'm like, and I would write on my phone every day, which I'm very proud of my past self for doing. I would write as much as I could on my phone every day, which made up like a lot of my word vomits on my word vomit project. But yeah, I was just really tired. I was so tired all the time. I was like spiritually exhausted, and I didn't. There's a lot of variables that go into this. I didn't feel like I had the right to take vacations. Like, and I'm sure if I talk to my colleagues and my boss about this right now, they'd be like, Visa, what the fuck? Why didn't you take more vacations? Like, it's your entitlement. Like, you're supposed to take vacations to clear your head and to be a good employee. And I don't know. I just felt like I was always behind. Like on retrospect, was I really behind? I mean, there's all, like, again, if you want to be running as fast as you can, you're gonna set targets that's always slightly out of reach, and you're always gonna fall a little bit short, and that's kind of okay. Like, you have to step outside yourself and see the bigger picture, and evaluate your performance. Kind of like, how much time are you spending? But I'm so bad at tracking my time. So if I could live my life all over again, there are a lot of things I would have done better. But again, like, that's easy to say with the benefit of hindsight. So I'm trying to do better moving forward. But at the time, I felt like I was exhausted. I felt like I couldn't give myself permission to take the breaks that I needed, which would have made me a better employee and a better husband. So like, yeah, the person, like, it was not great. I wasn't a great husband the first 5 years or so that I got married. I mean, I always, and my wife knows who she married, and kind of like the bulk of my value proposition as a husband is that I'm very I always feel, and as well as not just as a husband but also as a friend, like I'm there for you in times of crises. If you make any mistakes or you fuck up anything, I will forgive you immediately and take care of you then. I will listen to anything you have to say. Like, I mean, I can imagine my wife rolling her eyes at that, because there are times where she tries to talk to me and I'm kind of just like not really listening. So, when I say listen, even that is kind of with asterisks. I have become a lot better, I think, since leaving my job and having spent time together with my wife. My marriage has definitely improved. So, it's a sobering realization that, like, having a job is bad for you. was bad for my marriage at the time. It's complex. You get it? It's multi-layered. I can't reduce anything down to one single variable. Like, me plus job plus marriage plus mortgage plus bad time management skills plus, faulty assumptions about how to live my life plus just inherited bullshit. All of those things added up to a very tight and painful situation where I didn't feel like I could carry all the weight that I was carrying, and the people who suffered the most as a consequence were myself and my wife, I think. And I am in the process of making it up to her and making it up to myself. And so I was really depressed, I think, again, kind of clinically-ish depressed around 2015, 2016. Yeah, one of my jokes is that maybe I get depressed like if I was depressed at like 16-ish and then 25-ish, maybe I'll get depressed again at like 36. Maybe it's like every square year, like 16, 25, 36, 49, 64. Like, that's a nice cadence at which to experience depressions. I think there was a moment as well, like during my depressive state. And like the second time I was depressed, so the first time I was depressed, I was fucking struggling. Like, I couldn't do shit. I was going to school every day, but I was like a zombie. The second time I was depressed, I was functional. I was like going to work, and I was like participating in meetings and then, doing my work, which I am on retrospect very proud of myself for, taking care of business while depressed. I haven't felt depressed since that time. I think I have processed my experiences. So I don't think of depression for me. I believe that there is a thing where depression is like a chemical scenario in your brain, like, your receptors are wonky or whatever. But I also think that there is the depression that I went through, which is, I wouldn't say it's like a passing cloud, or it's it felt more like, it felt like an emotional like, if I understand correctly, like, when you get a fever, the fever is actually kind of it's not that the virus or whatever gave you the fever, but rather when your body detects the virus, it creates the fever to create conditions where you can handle the virus, where your antibodies and your immune system can take care of the virus, kill the virus, right? I feel like for me, my depression states may have been something similar. Like, it may have been kind of my body/mind's way of telling me that something's not right and you have to address it. And it seems kind of ridiculous because, again, like, when you have a fever, you're physically kind of condemned, right? Like, you can't... Condemned is like a military... In the military, I think in my storeroom back in the military days, like, when you say condemned, it means like an item can no longer be used. Anyway, when you're in a fever, you're kind of like forced to rest. And I guess that's the point of sickness. Like you haven't been sleeping well, you haven't been eating well, and your body's kind of like, hey, what the fuck? Like we are in a state of distress, and then fuck it, fall sick, and now you have no choice but to just lie there and recover. So it's like, there's a quote that's something like, if you don't schedule your maintenance, it will be scheduled for you. Like, with regards to your physical well-being and fitness, like, if you don't have a rest day, if you're working out every day, then your body will schedule maintenance for you by getting injured and falling sick. And I feel like depression for me, to some degree, was something like that. I mean, maybe it could have been kept at bay. So, like, it seems like so a thing that happened in both of my depression experiences, was that in both cases I'm realizing there was like a collapse of meaning, right? So when I was 16, 17, I was getting meaning from music and my social reality, and then that kind of collapsed, and then I had to kind of reconstruct it from scratch, and then that also kind of collapsed. And if I hadn't been through those depressive states, would I have been able to reconstruct and reimagine myself, like, all the way through? I'm not so sure. I don't think, so I think there's an element of creative destruction to my depressions, and which is, again, I don't want to romanticize it because it's fucking miserable. I remember I have photos of myself when I'm on the train on the way to work or on the way home, and I'm fucking depressed, and I have a selfie. It's like I just want to die. You can just see in my face that I just want to die, and there's nothing romantic about that. It's just pain, and not even pain. Again, so like when I was 13, I experienced pain. When I was 17, it wasn't pain. It was this absence of feeling, kind of. It's just this vacancy, this cold, dull, bleak, blurry, meh. Just what is the point of anything? Where am I going? It's like the opposite of excitement, the opposite of zest and life. Just this prison vibe, this desolation. I find that coming out of depression, you get to feel sad. Like, feeling sad and crying can actually alleviate depression, I feel, for me. And it takes something to feel. It's hard to, I've been talking for 50 minutes, and I don't feel necessarily like I've completely kind of articulated everything I want to say, but I don't want this video to go on for over an hour. But I have a lot of feelings about this stuff. I feel like I do feel like I spent some time in what people call the dark night of the soul, and just it's total collapse of meaning. Nothing you do can save you. Nothing, I think Louis C.K. had this line. I was just rewatching it. He said, deep down inside, you're fundamentally alone, and it's all for nothing. And when you're not depressed and you say that kind of thing, it doesn't. I can say that, and it doesn't fuck me. It's just, yeah, it's true. All right. But I'm making a video, and I'm gonna post the video, and people are gonna respond positively to it or whatever. And I remember what it was like. That's the thing. I remember when everything was so bleak, and everything was so dark, and nothing I read, nothing anybody said seemed to help. One thing that did help was listening to Alan Watts on YouTube, which is that so he wasn't in denial about the bleakness of reality. I think anytime anybody came at me with like, "Oh, life's not so bad," I'm like, "Fuck you." Life is advertised as an adventure, but it's really a fucking ordeal, right? So don't pretend that it's not an ordeal. Don't pretend that I don't don't condescend to me with life's not so bad. Life is bad. That was my feeling then. But how Alan Watts got to me was he didn't deny that. He was like, he saw that life was funny. And it is also funny to I read about him later on, and it turns out that he eventually became an alcoholic. But I like to believe that, so somebody once tweeted Alan Watts was an alcoholic, and I like to flip it and say an alcoholic was Alan Watts. Like, someone who was an alcoholic was also Alan Watts. It's like diamond in the, not rough, just unlike, enlightenment can come from strange origins, right? And I think humor definitely helped me. I think trying to cheer up a depressed person by telling them to cheer up is the most counterproductive and useless thing you can do. If I could go back in time and hang out with depressed Visa, I wouldn't tell him to cheer up. I wouldn't, I would mostly ask questions. I would ask him to describe his situation. I would ask him to describe his problems, and not in a way that I'm going to solve them. I'm not going to solve his problems for him. I'm not going to show him some magical answer. But I would just have him articulate his frustrations. Articulate, so like, what is it about your life that is bothering you? And, like, so even now I can say collapse of meaning, right? And I feel like I am now well equipped, I believe, right? I'm probably going to be proven wrong the next time this hits, and then I can look back at this video and laugh at myself. But see, I can laugh at myself. That's a thing that I have that I didn't have before, right? Anticipating what the next depressive state is going to be like. So I do think that my 17-year-old depression, like, was the worst of my life. I don't think it'll ever get that bad again because I had no idea what was ahead. I had no idea if I was going to make it out. I had no idea if it was going to end. It's like the first time you're drunk maybe, and you don't know whether is it ever going to end. Like it's like once you've experienced the full cycle the first time, the second time is not so bad, right? Yeah. So in my case, the second depression was just what was doubly depressing was that, so in my second depression, I thought that the things that were depressing, I thought that depression was because of the first set of circumstances, right? Like no control, just being in an environment that I had no control over, and then just all that kind of, I don't know anything about the world, and I seem to be stupid, I seem to be wrong, like all those things. I resolved those things that were around my first depression, so it shouldn't happen again, right? And it didn't happen the same way, it happened differently. But yeah, I feel like I fixed those conditions, and then there's a new set of problems to fix, and then I think I fixed those as well. I wouldn't put it past myself that, I wouldn't be surprised if I get depressed again at some point. I'm not gonna lose any sleep over worrying about why I might someday get depressed again. But like, I talk to depressed people from time to time, and I like to try and be a nourishing and supportive presence. And I think that's the best you can do. I don't think you can pull someone out of their depression. I think a depression is almost like I mean, so apart from people who are kind of chemically, like because of brain chemical issues, who are kind of like forced to, and I have no judgment for how you manage your depression if you're depressed. I have no judgment for what you do to cope, whether you take medication, whatever it is you got to do it. Like I won't judge anybody else for how they deal, right? Because life is fucking ridiculous, and like you have to survive. I mean, you don't have to survive, but it is what it is, man. Guys, girls, friends, and yeah, I just wanted to talk about this, and I don't know if I've said anything that's of use to anybody. I imagine it'll be of use to some people just to hear me talk about depression at all, because I think some people have this impression that I'm some kind of super cheerful, super optimistic, super kind of eternal sunshine guy, which is extremely far from the truth. I carry my sadness with me all the time, and I like that about myself. I think I posted on Twitter today I replied to somebody who said he was sad, and I said he said, what do I do with my sadness? How do I make it go away? And I said, I'm always sad. And people were replying saying, oh, I'm so sorry, I think when people see someone say I'm always sad, they think that's a bad thing, like I'm suffering. I can see why they might think that, or I can see how I can choose to interpret it as they are trying to be good friends and they're trying to show concern and care, which I appreciate. But I think my sadness is something I carry with me in a position of strength. I think my sadness makes me strong. I think it makes me sensitive to other people. I think it makes me relatable. I think it makes me real, right? It means that I'm legit. Like, I had a client who was like, she had some plans for her career stuff that she was going to talk to me through, And then like the next day she replied with like, I'm just too depressed to function. And I'm I felt great that she felt comfortable telling me that, and like then we can have that really honest relationship, right? So being sad is a part of who I am. And it's like imagine music with no minor chords. Like that's just you need minor chords in music. Even in happy songs there are minor chords. And like similarly, like in life you need sadness. Like you can't live a sad free life. That is in a way grotesque and dystopian, right? Because life is light and dark, yin and yang, happy and sad. And like depression and sadness aren't the same thing. Like you can be sad without being depressed, and when you're depressed, like your sadness takes on this monotonous disengagement. I've crossed an hour already, so I'm just gonna end it here. But if you've listened to the full hour, I'm amazed. I hope you guys have like video speed controller to watch these things at faster speeds. And leave me a comment if you guys like, and tell me about your experiences, and we can chat about it. I'm happy to chat with anyone who is interested in talking about these things. And I do believe that it's something that can make us stronger, can make us wiser. And you don't have to suffer it alone. I think I was very lonely both times. I think the first time I was lonely I was very lonely. I think being less lonely would have helped. I don't feel like I had anybody I could really talk to about my feelings then. Like I didn't feel like I could talk to my wife about it, because so these days I can talk to my wife about more things, but at the time, I felt like just my wife and my boss were the two people I talked to the most. But they are also people who are in my life, if that makes sense. Like they are participants, right? Like no matter how cool your boss is, you never really want to go completely unprofessional around him, right? And I think there is some version of that in a marriage. Like it's, I wouldn't say professional, but there's some shit that you don't say to your I'm not saying be dishonest with your spouse. So that's the challenge of honesty, right? You want to convey as much as you can about your state to your spouse, but like you don't necessarily want to like and I mean, so the thing about marriage, I think, is that eventually whatever it is that you're trying to not say will come out anyway, right? So at some point during one of my kind of slightly manic states, like my wife and I were having a conversation, I think, and I just blurted out at some point that she's such a burden, which is do I regret saying that? It was not a nice thing to say, but it was how I felt at the time, and I'm not proud of how I felt, but it was how I felt. And she was upset with me, understandably so, and we had a conversation about it. And it's not like my feelings were wrong, but just I should have, part of the reason I felt the way I did was because I hadn't been able to communicate with her better up until that point. And so, the way that we worked through that was to talk more about the origins of those feelings and what we went through and stuff like that. And so where am I going with that? I think it's super helpful to have people that you can talk to about your feelings without worrying that it would have immediate consequences on your life. So with regards to, for example, telling my wife that I felt she was a burden, it would have been helpful if I had said that to someone else first, and they could have responded with, dude, why would you say that? Like, let's examine this. What is the origin of that thought? And then, I would be like, oh, because I do all of this, and I do this, that, whatever it is, like, just someone else could have helped me trace back the feeling to, like, what is the kind of starting condition. And then I could have just gone to her with that and be like, hey, can we talk about this? And then, so, that would have spared us some conflict and some pain and some frustration. But, life is life, and some amount of conflict is kind of inevitable, right? And I don't think it's healthy to be completely averse to having conflicts. But I guess I'm describing the role that a therapist ideally would provide, because they are not your family member, they are not your colleague or spouse or whatever, and they are there to help you troubleshoot your life in a way that even your friends can't entirely do. I think that if you have like an anonymous Twitter account and you have anonymous Twitter friends, that can be a pretty good proxy. Again, because I never wanted to. I do believe therapy can be great, but I'm skeptical of the. I've heard some horror stories about like mental health professionals and therapists in Singapore, and so I am not a big fan of. And that's a separate conversation, but this video has gone on for way too long, so I'm gonna end it here. Let me know what you think if you've made it this far. Thanks for hanging out. Done.